So, is Apple actually falling behind in the AI race? I mean, it's literally the million-dollar question echoing through the tech world right now. Imagine being the absolute most valuable tech company on the planet, a company that basically defines the future for all of us, only to be caught completely off guard. Well, that is exactly what happened when generative AI exploded onto the scene in late 2022. It was a massive shock to the system that forced Apple to completely and dramatically change course. Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking the absolute reality behind Apple Intelligence. We're going to cut through the incredible hype, look at the fascinating hardware actually powering this stuff, and talk about the frankly bumpy reality of its release. We're talking groundbreaking privacy tech, billion-dollar deals, and yeah, even false advertising lawsuits. Let's get into it. All right, here's our roadmap for today. 1. The AI wake-up call. 2. The features and the hype. 3. Privacy and hardware limits. 4. The staggered rollout. And 5. The controversies and growing pains. Let's dive right in. Starting with part 1, the AI wake-up call, or getting completely blindsided by ChatGPT. Look, to really grasp Apple's current position, we actually have to rewind all the way back to 2011. When Apple launched Siri on the iPhone 4S, they literally had a massive head start in artificial intelligence. But over the years, their intense, legendary focus on corporate secrecy basically deterred top graduate students from joining their team. Eventually, Siri just squandered its lead. It started lagging way behind competitors like Amazon's Alexa and Google Assistant, something that got criticized a lot, not just by reviewers, but internally at Apple, too. And then came late 2022. The rapid development of generative AI and the explosive release of OpenAI's ChatGPT reportedly completely blindsided Apple executives. Now, publicly, CEO Tim Cook went on TV saying they were looking closely at ChatGPT. But behind the scenes, total scramble. They realized they had to refocus everything, pouring immense time and resources into a secret internal large language model. Its codename? Ajax. But here's the thing. Building a world-class AI model from scratch is incredibly hard, even for Apple. Their internal development hit plenty of speed bumps, which forced them to look outside their own tightly closed ecosystem. By January 2026, we saw the announcement of a monumental multi-year partnership. Apple agreed to a deal nearing a staggering $1 billion a year to use Google's Gemini AI and cloud infrastructure. By tapping into Google's massive 1.2 trillion parameter Gemini model, a system trained on just an unfathomable amount of human knowledge, Apple was finally able to integrate a significantly smarter system into Siri than they could ever build on their own in that short of a time frame. Which naturally brings us to part 2, features and the hype, or what Apple Intelligence can actually do. With the foundation finally set, Apple took the stage at the 2024 Worldwide Developers Conference. This was their moment to prove they were back in the game. And honestly, the proposed integration into our daily lives was pretty breathtaking. They unveiled writing tools to completely rewrite your emails, real-time translation right inside your AirPods for seamless cross-cultural chats, and for the creatives out there, Image Playground and custom Genmoji generated completely on the fly. The Mail app got AI categorization and priority sorting. They even showed off visual intelligence, where you just hold the camera control button to instantly learn about objects out in the real world. But nothing illustrated this pivot quite like the total overhaul of Siri. I mean, we all knew the old Siri, a basic assistant that needed super rigid commands, and let's be honest, misunderstood us half the time anyway. The new Siri, it transforms into a conversational LLM chatbot. It actually understands the context of what is currently on your screen. And, crucially, it features an opt-in, system-wide integration with OpenAI's ChatGPT, specifically powered by GPT-4o, for when you throw a really complex request at it. Okay, moving to part 3, privacy and hardware limits. Let's look at the tech actually powering all this AI. So here is the big dilemma. AI requires a massive amount of computing power, which usually means sending your personal data off to some remote third-party server. Obviously, that doesn't fly with Apple's famous stance on user data. Their solution? Private cloud compute. When a task is just too heavy for your phone to process locally, it gets securely beamed to Apple's own cloud infrastructure. But here is the brilliant catch. These servers run entirely on custom Apple's silicon, built specifically for end-to-end encryption. The software on these servers is independently verifiable by public researchers. In fact, if the server software doesn't perfectly match the public verifiable logs, your iPhone will literally refuse to connect to it. It's an absolutely fascinating technological safeguard. But of course, there's a trade-off. This high level of on-device processing requires some serious hardware. So check your pockets, because Apple Intelligence is definitely not backward compatible. To run it, you need a Mac or iPad with an M series chip, or an iPad mini with the A17 Pro. For the iPhone crowd, you're looking at the 15 Pro or Pro Max, the 16 series, the 16e, or the new iPhone Air. According to Apple, older chips simply lack the dedicated neural engine power needed. Plus, as analysts have pointed out, older phones just don't have the massive RAM required to run these foundation models locally. All of this intense engineering brings us directly to part 4, the staggered rollout and a very fragmented timeline. Because despite all that massive marketing hype at the developer conference promising a completely revolutionized device from day one, the reality for consumers has been, well, a slow trickle. The gap between the flashy announcements and actual usability has been huge. We got basic writing tools and photo cleanup in October 2024. Genmoji finally arrived in December. It wasn't until March 2025 that we saw the expansion of visual intelligence. And those really major game-changing features like live translation pushed all the way to iOS 26.0 in September 2025. It's a highly fragmented release schedule that has seriously tested the patience of early adopters, stretching well over a full year. And if you happen to be in one of Apple's biggest markets, the wait is even longer. Fast forward to March 2026, and Apple Intelligence remains completely unavailable on devices purchased in mainland China or on any device using an Apple account set to mainland China. Now, Apple did partner with Alibaba Group to integrate their QN language models, but strict regulatory reviews by the Cyberspace Administration of China, combined with incredibly complex U.S. national security concerns, have essentially stalled the rollout over there completely. Which naturally leads us to our final section: controversies and growing pains, hallucinations, and lawsuits. Look, when you mix sky-high hype with a delayed rollout and the sheer unpredictability of generative AI, you are bound to hit some major speed bumps. Let's look objectively at some of the hiccups plaguing this system. One of the biggest? AI hallucinations, which is when the AI just confidently makes up fake information. Back in December 2024, the BBC actually sent multiple complaints to Apple after the system generated some wildly problematic summaries for news alerts. We're talking falsely reporting that a recently arrested suspect in a high-profile CEO shooting had killed himself. It prematurely announced Luke Littler won a darts championship hours before the final even happened. And inexplicably, it identified a straight Spanish tennis player as a gay Brazilian athlete. Just bizarre stuff. Now, Apple's initial defense was to gently remind everyone that the features were still in beta, but eventually, they had to take much firmer action. In subsequent iOS updates, they actually temporarily disabled news notification summaries altogether. When they finally brought them back, they implemented a strict new label reading summarized by Apple Intelligence and buried a permanent disclaimer in the Settings app warning users that these summaries may contain errors. Honestly, it's a pretty stark contrast to Apple's usual philosophy of things just working. But it wasn't just bizarre summaries causing headaches. The delays and that fragmented release schedule triggered actual legal action. In March 2025, a false advertising class action lawsuit, LandShift v. Apple Inc., was filed. The plaintiffs basically argued that Apple ran a pervasive marketing campaign built on a lie, deceiving consumers into buying the new iPhone 16 for AI features that simply did not exist at launch. Apple tried to dismiss it, arguing that only a couple of the promised features were actually delayed. But ultimately, by December 2025, they reached an agreement in principle to resolve the matter on a class-wide basis through a formal settlement. So what's the big takeaway here? Apple Intelligence represents a massive, absolutely necessary pivot for a tech giant that suddenly found itself playing a game of catch-up. They've introduced some genuinely fascinating privacy innovations, like private cloud compute, and secured huge partnerships to bridge their own tech gaps. But man, the rollout has undeniably been messy. It leaves us with a really compelling question to ponder. Will Apple's secure, privacy-first approach ultimately win the AI long game? Or will this incredibly fragmented timeline, the bizarre hallucinations, and the legal hurdles permanently damage their legendary reputation for polished perfection? It's a fascinating evolution for sure, and one we are going to be watching very closely. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. See you next time.